Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on financial services applications and how you can shift their rollout into high gear with infrastructure certification. So I'm Shashi Kiran here with Quali, and I am very pleased to welcome two experts who can talk about this topic in detail. Christian Horner, who's a area director for worldwide technology and focused on financial services. Welcome, Christian. And,
great to be here. Thank you.
And Dosanjh, who is a solution architect here with Quali, and both of these gentlemen will be speaking about the challenges that especially financial services institutions face in terms of faster application rollouts and how compliance can become a bit of a bottleneck for them and run into issues with regards to certification. So today we have a pretty packed agenda. Our intent is to go through this for about an hour or so and see if we can get some questions also out of the way. We'll start with giving some additional context behind this webinar on some of the trends that we're seeing in the financial services industry and particularly the intersection with fintech. And Christian will come on board and share some perspectives on what he is hearing on WWT's behalf and some of the major asks that are coming in from customers in that space. Then we'll get into a bit of a case study for certification that DOS is going to walk us through with a realistic real-world scenario, but modeled on a fictitious customer. And then we'll get into how WWT is really helping many of these customers go through and cross the compliance hurdle with their Advanced Technology Center. And we have a demo coming up with DOS as well, so stay tuned for that. So to get some perspective on why this webinar, why now, it's really the state of affairs that we see across the industry at large, and particularly in the context of financial services, which is evolving very rapidly in terms of all sectors, whether it's banking, traditional finance, leasing, or insurance, and all of these associated payment transaction industries. And if you look at the rapid pace of change that's happening, what was traditionally a brick and mortar institution, a bank, for instance, where you could walk in and you see different people, today the notion of the bank itself is changing. The notion of currency is changing. You see things like Bitcoin pop up where your bank is essentially on your USB drive and you don't know who actually invented Bitcoin, and you have crypto mechanisms coming up with blockchain ciphers, and the whole domain of finance and technology is so rapidly evolving, and consequently we are seeing customer experiences and customer expectations at a different level compared to where they were before. And that's really what's challenging the need to become more agile for a number of financial services institutions. You again look at a simple functionality like a teller across the counter that many of us growing up would have been used to. And then we saw the sprawl of automated teller machines coming into play, every street corner having an ATM dispensing cash. And you got used to the idea of self-service, you got used to the idea of automation. And today we're seeing a lot of these now happening on our mobile phones, where every financial application becomes a window to a transaction that we could achieve. And the onus really is on experience, as I mentioned, but it's also on automation, self-service, and to see how much can you actually get done without interfacing with a human. And this is the experience that a lot of the traditional institutions, multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, are all experiencing. And this is bringing disruption. So today we see, based on the survey from PricewaterhouseCoopers, that in the context of banking and payments, almost 28% of businesses are at risk of going obsolete by 2020. We're seeing a similar pattern in terms of insurance, asset management, wealth management, where if they don't innovate, then you tend to risk being that frog where the temperature in the water was incrementally raised and you never knew what hit you till the temperature reached the burning point. So None of the institutions want to be this frog. They want to detect the changes early on. They want to innovate rapidly, and they want to stay ahead of the disruptors. And in reality, many of the large institutions are doing that. So for example, you look at Capital One, which has been very aggressive in positioning themselves as a technology company. They were one of the first to go all in onto AWS and come on stage in one of the reInvent events and proclaim thus. And so they've embraced cloud very aggressively. They've embraced software very aggressively. And they've embraced the aspect of taking customer experience very seriously. And we see this across a number of traditional FSIs that are trying to embrace change, but these are big ships, and as with any other big ship, these are hard to turn. And so today, we are seeing the boundary between fintech institutions, which were traditionally small startups addressing a niche technology, versus these bigger banking and financial institutions. The boundaries between them are blurring, and every company, as we very often hear, is becoming a technology company, and software is the new normal. Now, if software is the new normal, then everybody needs to compete with software differentiation being the table stakes. And here is where there's a huge opportunity to see how can you be leveling the playing field with software. How can you keep costs under budget? How can you catch things early on? Because while software brings agility into the mix, it also brings in a lot of bugs, which traditionally you might not have been exposed to. And if everybody is embracing software, then the ROI, which was easier to compare versus hardware solution, now becomes, again, table stakes. And you need to keep projects on time. You need to make sure that you don't redo things again and again, because every rework costs time, every rework costs money, every rework costs a competitive differentiation lag. So this is really what we are seeing many financial services institutions try to get a lid on and make sure that they are very competitive. And as we all know, it is very easy to fix things if they're caught early, especially in the context of security, especially in the context of areas of compliance. The sooner you catch it, the less it costs to fix it, and the easier it is to make the fix. And this is really a chart which goes back a couple of decades, actually, but it is still very relevant today. And what we see is today, especially when these environments are a lot more complex, today we see applications that are on-premise, in the cloud, hybrid, being accessed across mobile endpoints, PCs, and you really need to replicate that complex environment to catch stuff. It is no longer relevant or pertinent to catch something in a unit environment, whether it's a unit developer or unit tester. You need to be in a position to model those complex environments to really find out where is your compliance lagging behind, where are you missing out with your certification, where is that security hole cropping up. And so we do see the sweet spot for it to be in the context of testing. And again, we don't think it's unit testing, but rather modeling these environments in such a way that they're representative of the production environments and the inherent complexity that is out there today. And if you can replicate that, and if you can expose that to the dev test teams early on, then the cost of these fixes becomes a lot lesser compared to you trying to fix that in production or later on in maintenance, where it could easily be 100 times more. And so that's really the hurdle that we see financial services institutions crossing today. How can you certify? Because we're seeing a number of changes happen in rapid succession, and each change brings with it change management and certification requirements. And if there isn't a process to do that in a very standardized way, then they are not going to make it. They are going to be one of the disruptees and not one of the disruptors. And so while there is a need to be agile, the need to do so while being compliant, while adhering to certification requirements is really what is the call of today. And today, as you know, the landscape for regulatory environments is pretty diverse in the context of financial services institutions, with the kind of threats that they are being exposed to and bugs that tend to propagate and bring down entire systems. It's very important that this certification is met in a very rigid, standardized manner. And this slide, for example, shows sample requirements for cybersecurity or compliance, the kind of threats that they're exposed to, how can you categorize them, and then what is at risk, and what can you do to prevent that risk. So these are the things that we are seeing amongst our customers, and I'm sure WWT is seeing a lot of it amongst their customers. And to talk about it at large, I would really like to, at this point, invite Christian in to share his thoughts and perspectives in terms of what he's experiencing from the financial services institutions and what WWT is doing there. Christian?
Sashi, thank you very much. Yeah, what you've just described is very much what we're seeing in the global financial industry. There is a considerable amount of complexity and risk that needs to be mitigated within that industry in order to ensure that they have a solid foundation for the delivery of service to their customers. But at the same time, they also are now, based on the events of the past that have driven much more regulatory and compliance into the banks, where they probably about 10 years ago were not as required to provide for the rigor and discipline around certification and testing and the insurance of infrastructure going out to the environment. Now it's becoming much more of a issue of maintaining the current base or environment and dealing with day two issues that come up in the field, and how do you provide testing services in order to make sure that those environments are compliant. But there is a legacy base of infrastructure within financial services that needs to be churned. And if you look at this slide, the pace of change is exponential at this point. There's an enormous amount of legacy methodologies in the environment that need to be overhauled, and there needs to be the development of more automated, and the testing environments need to deal with software to find everything. So these are the things that are coming at our customers that we see in global financial and probably across the entire industry from both a business and technology standpoint. Cybersecurity, software-defined infrastructure, competing technologies from different OEMs, global deployments. Our global financial firms are, the nature of the environments there are thousands and thousands of locations across the globe that need a consistent deployment and environment in order to maintain consistency in the experience that both the employees that use that environment, as well as the end customers that consume financial services, need to experience. And one of the biggest issues here on the lower left-hand side is, from a testing and certification perspective, there is a complete lack of automation, and we're seeing that these environments or these customers are absolutely trying to test, certify, deploy technology using legacy manual methods, and the automation piece is really the most important piece of this of what we're trying to deploy within our customers. So these are just a small amount of questions that we get asked every day. How do we evaluate solutions faster? How do we certify, deploy, and then test new code on day 2. How can we replicate our lab environments in your lab? A lot of the financial services organizations, number 3 here, are looking to get out of the lab business. They'd like to migrate from the legacy environments that they have, which are manual, physically interconnected, and move that to a much more automated, agile, and innovative lab environment. And then also other things that they ask us is, how can lab automation help us compress the time to certify new technologies? And those new technologies or those new solutions are not a single vendor solution, but they are very much a multi-vendor, multi-OEM type of solutions that go into these environments. And then they also ask us, how can you make our lab, the people, the process, the technology, more efficient as well? So we've spent about 5 years or more developing and I'll speak about this later, an environment that is agile, it is innovative, it is automated, and every executive briefing that we do for our customers, 9 times out of 10, they walk away asking, how can we replicate what you're doing in your lab in our labs? Not just push all of the work from their labs into worldwide, because at the end of the day, a firm's certification effort needs to be signed off by that firm, and they also have their data, their security systems, their management and metering and monitoring systems need to be hooked into that solution, and it needs to be done on-prem. So it's not just an out-task or an outsource, but it is very much a hybrid lab solution that we're hearing from our customers. How can we offload tasks to you, but how can you make our labs and our capabilities much more efficient, agile, and automated? So the picture on the left definitely is very apropos. I was actually at a customer this week, and this picture of all the wires hanging off the gear is actually looks good compared to what I saw in a lab that I saw this week. And the complexity and the capability for a firm to bring new gear into an environment, test, certify, and then deploy into production, there's an enormous amount of complexity. And customers are really struggling with the cost of their own labs and how efficient those labs are. So certifying infrastructure and applications are enormously time-consuming and costly. And I would argue that a lot of the firms that we're working with don't even know what the cost of certification really is. They don't have a handle on it, and they're looking for help in order to make that to bring those costs into control. And then again, at the end, the change, testing, validating, rapid change management, using Agile to provide testing services and certification services to rapidly test environments in order to get through the certification process and into production is definitely on every one of our customers' minds. So again, traditional compliance testing in labs, from an agility standpoint, it's very physical, very manual, very difficult to share equipment. There's an enormous amount of long setup time to set up environments, and it leads to productivity loss, and is not cloud friendly. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by cloud when we talk about the Advanced Technology Center. Efficiency, the environments that we see in our financial services labs, very underutilized. They need to provide for mostly day 2 and keeping the lights on, and are not DevOps enabled. And then from a cost standpoint, I know some labs or some organizations have up to 50 different labs, and they're duplicating their efforts. Each lab is self-governed and self-operated. And what our customers are looking at is that an enormous amount of CapEx and OpEx are being put into those environments, and they have very limited visibility into an overall understanding of what's actually being tested at any given point in time in each one of those labs. So what we're hearing is there needs to be better resource and asset utilization. They need to be able to provide not only physical access inside the lab environments, but also remote access to labs environments globally. So there are requirements for both training, education, testing, certification, deployment requirements associated from a global perspective. And each one of these, self-governed labs don't provide that. And they're also looking for a lab as a service, an on-demand, self-service environment that allows them to access resources quickly, get access to testing tools, and one of the most important things is to be able to provision environments very quickly. Lastly, once those environments are tested and certified, they also need to be put away as far as a snapshot, saved, so that if something does come up, there is a bug, there is an issue on day 2, they need to be able to bring those environments back, allow for testing to occur with new code, new hardware, what have you, new software, to be able to remediate issues and deal with support and troubleshooting aspects as well.
Thank you, Christian. So that's a really good overview of some of the large financial services institutions that are interfacing with WWT. And you were kind enough to proxy a lot of the requirements in a nutshell. And with that, maybe we segue to DOS. So DOS, you can walk us through how would you address this from a solution perspective, and then maybe we can come back into Christian's and talk about ATC and how and what cloud as a lab as a cloud means.
Thank you, Shashi, and thank you, Christian, for the introduction to some of the challenges. What I'm going to share with the audience here is a scenario entitled Acme Bank, and this is based upon my experience with some of the largest financial firms across the globe over the past several years and some of the challenges that they faced. Really what you're looking at is there is no compromise when it comes to executive leadership around security and compliance. These organizations are on the hook to make sure that whatever application, whatever IT infrastructure is developed and put into production at the data centers meets these requirements of security as well as compliance. What I've highlighted here is a workflow from an end user, could be at home, could be in an office, that's accessing a financial application through the public internet and being serviced by Acme Bank, both the application front end and then the associated infrastructure. What you see highlighted in bubble number 1 are some of the application requirements based upon market conditions, whether it's an interest rate change, could be some other offers from a competitor that are making its way into that particular situation. And the requirement there is to then update that loan application. On the right-hand side, in addition to the business and application requirements, the IT infrastructure may have their own pace of maintenance updates. There may be new cyber threats, and they require patching and software version updates, as well as regulatory compliance. As the landscape around the world changes with regards to data protection and other things, compliance becomes front and center on how an organization may offer services. So the IT infrastructure needs to be adhering to those kind of requirements. So the way you would approach this, I've taken the liberty of what I've used in the past is a prescriptive approach that could be applied to this particular Acme Bank scenario. You first do a discovery and an assessment. Basically, what you're looking at is what kind of security and compliance measures are in place, what's the gap, and what needs to be addressed. The second one there is resources and process alignment. What you're looking to accomplish there is to make sure that you actually have the right capabilities so that you can execute on what the findings were during the discovery and assessment. And last but not least is the product and solution components. There's a lot of changes in technology, so you want to make sure that what you assess and what you recommend are going to be applicable as you move forward. So just to go a layer deeper into step one, the discovery. On the left-hand side, I'm going to highlight the application first. There may be changes to the loan application. You may need additional fields. I'll leave it at that. There may be other dependencies, but at a high level, you may have to add fields to make sure that these new offers are valid. The second part of that is we've highlighted application servers. So a lot of where these applications are running on the front end, the databases, and some of the application logic, some of those underlying components may need to be updated. On the right-hand side, in parallel, the IT infrastructure, as we alluded to earlier, is subject to cybersecurity and compliance in this example. And what I've highlighted here is cybersecurity. There could be a transport layer attack or weak protocols used that allow unauthenticated remote attackers to compromise the environment. At the same time, compliance regulations are always being updated based upon technology innovation. So the IT infrastructure has to be in a position to address these things. As you start to look at addressing these things, the first thing that you have to look at are the folks that are responsible for this. In step two, some of the most common resource constraints that I've come across and were alluded to earlier, and what I've highlighted here in blue is the people. That's the number one thing that I see with all of these different folks that have to come together to ensure that they have the right process in place to actually accomplish the security and compliance updates. Some of the things that you see on the periphery there, the test environment, very manual, what was alluded to earlier by Christian. On the right-hand side, each department or each team may have their own tools, whether they're proprietary, they're open source, some may be standard, some may be non-standard. Some may be some tools that folks have created themselves that don't adhere to anything. So it's a mix and match of tools that they use and not very scalable or standardized across the org. What that leads to then on the bottom left is things that should be pretty straightforward from a technical standpoint end up taking weeks and months due to process, non-standard tools, and a very manual process. And last but not least, as you look at the budget and you try to forecast for these kind of situations, you typically find that you're underfinanced and the complexity is underestimated. If you're going from 5 environments to 50 to 100, that complexity is not a trivial task to actually make sure that your security and your compliance updates are going to be applicable. So this is a really key slide when it comes to some of the constraints that are involved. If you start to dig a little deeper, on step 3, what I've highlighted here are some of the impacted infrastructure components. I'm going to leave the application ones aside. I'll deal with that in some other nuance, if you will. But what I'm really going to focus on for this Acme Bank scenario is the base level IT infrastructure. And what I've called out there are some of the base components that I've typically seen that are really challenging for some of these legacy environments. I've highlighted routers, firewalls, proxies, and load balancers. And as we start to take a closer look at that, I've associated 4 vendors. Just selected them at random. There could be other vendors also included, but it's really based upon what I'm seeing out there in most of the enterprises. What you're seeing here in the IT network infrastructure table is I've highlighted the different components with vendor products in red. That means they're going from a older version, and during the discovery and assessment, they now require an updated version. And if you look at the very first row with the firmware updates where that's highlighted, you can see that the router needs to go from version 15.4 to 15.5. And the network proxy needs to go from 6.5 to 6.6. Now these are firmware updates that were probably already in flight as far as a regular maintenance cycle working with those particular vendors. But as things surface with cyber threats and compliance regulations, a configuration update or a policy change may need to be applied. And what I've called out here is on the firewall, we've gone from 7.0 to 8.0, maybe some other patches that are included. And then on the load balancer itself, we've done a software revision that can also incorporate some of those changes. So as you start to look at those updates that are required, what you need to have in place then is not only an update mechanism for the individual products, but then an interoperable solution to where you can seamlessly integrate these components, the downstream as well as the upstream vendor products, and then include them in a battery of tests. And what I've highlighted here in this slide is a very high-level summary of the type of environments you could have. You can have a multitude more, or some of those folks may use different nuances, but what I'm describing here is a flow between environment 1, the dev test lab, where you may have the initial update done, and then you do the interoperability just for feature function. When you get into environment 2, quality assurance or QA, you may start to introduce load. You may introduce third-party tools that start to test performance and other criteria. As you get into environment number 3, you start to look at security vulnerabilities. You start to do vulnerability assessments or penetration testing. Again, it's with the same product set and the interoperable upgrades that have been applied, and you want to make sure that they're passing each stage before they get what I've called here environment number 4 or staging pre-production. This should mirror your production environment. So as you've gone through dev test, QA, and security, as you get to staging and pre-prod or pre-production, you should have a high availability, failover, and end-to-end test to make sure that everything in that environment is ready to go for production. So once you've done that, you're ready to address some of these challenges. As was alluded to earlier, some of the problems, if you don't have an agile way, an efficient model, and an estimate of what this will undertake from a resource perspective, you're going to run into some of these challenges where it can take weeks to months. You're having to duplicate everything, and that's going to add cost and time, as well as not meeting your target requirements. If you allude back to what I stated as security and compliance, these things have a shelf life. If you don't patch them within a certain amount of time, you're vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, that means you're not compliant. Therefore, you cannot offer these services to your new customer base. So with that, what we're introducing here at Quali is a solution that's called the Quali Cloud Shell, and we have an opportunity to address those challenges by offering a blueprint for any environment and deploying that as a service. What I'll highlight here are really 3 important criteria which are identified on this graphic with features, environment, and interface. As you start to look at the features and you start to blueprint that model, that is critical. That upfront assessment and that discovery that I talked about earlier is really getting an understanding of what the business is trying to accomplish and how would you model that. As you start to look at the why and then you apply that to what you're going to do and where you're going to do that, the environments are going to be selected that are applicable to that update. In the case of Acme Bank, you're looking at the IT infrastructure, and we segue down into the network components. So this is where you would really get into the differentiation of, is it physical equipment? Is it virtual equipment? Are you going to start to use containers or other capabilities that are emerging in the marketplace? And then you look at the interfaces. What else do I need to be cognizant of third parties, integration, the user experience, and where is this all going to flow into from a cloud perspective, public, private, hybrid, and all the subtleties that are involved there. So in order to address that, the Quali Cloud Shell blueprint and the environment that we're depicting here really starts with those 3 elements. What you'll also start to look at then is how do you start to build a recipe to get some efficiency involved in a faster certification process. And this is really where I think the Quali solution shines from a blueprint, standardization, an automation, and an orchestration standpoint. What you really want to do is get that upfront assessment and discover what you have from an inventory perspective to ensure that what you have in place, whether it's legacy, going through an upgrade, or net new from a product and component perspective, you're able to apply that in the environment that you're selecting. Whether it's a hybrid model, on-prem, or in a public cloud, you have to ensure that what you're modeling and automating are going to be interoperable once the updates have applied. Number three there, the creating of the blueprints is really key, because the challenges that I've seen is the different blueprints per environment. You want to standardize that. Something simple as an environment working with the wrong software version will fail the audit, will fail the compliance requirements. So you have to make sure that your blueprints are exact, and what they incorporate from a product and a software version are applicable in each environment. And what that means is something that you can self-service. Steps 4 and 5, as far as automating that and making sure you're orchestrating that, making it easy to snapshot, easy to reuse, easy for somebody else to say, aha, this is the authorized blueprint. I've got the green light to use this in my test. That's critical. And as you get into step number 5, as far as looking into some of the results, how can you better forecast, and how you're using your resources, that really gets you into position to offer differentiated services, because now you can get to market faster with a certified update and compliance requirements being met. So here's an example of what a blueprint model would look like for Acme Bank. We have highlighted the firewall, the router, the proxy, and the load balancer on the top, which we alluded to earlier. And the representation of that within the Quali Cloud Shell environment is represented below. This is a highly available architecture, so you'll see different network connections to the different routes for the application servicing. But what you'll see here, it's almost like a Visio drawing. It's a drag and drop capability. You're able to then quickly architect it, reserve the resources, and then deploy this in a manner that is mapping to what you've required in the design and architecture phase. So with that, we're going to go into a demo, and we'll walk through some of the steps of what we just described for Acme Bank. What we've highlighted here are 4 blueprint. One is called Dev Test, and all the way through down to security and operations. On the right-hand side, we have the various categories that could be applied to roles, permission, and access to those various teams. I'm going to go ahead and select Network IT. And in that particular catalog, we have Dev Tests and HA Performance. I'm going to go ahead and select the first one, Dev Test Financial Services IT. And what you'll note here is 4 components that have their associated vendor products, and they've been connected as well as defined in this architecture. So what we can do here is save this as a template. So we would come up to Blueprint and save as a template, and this can be consistently used for any subsequent tests. I've already gone ahead and conducted that, so I'm going to go ahead and reference that template that's in place. So I'm going to go ahead and create a blueprint, and here's the template that I had created before. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and what you'll note is those 4 products are listed here as parameters, and here is where I can select the right version of software I want. So in the example that we've used throughout the presentation, we're going to update these to the latest versions. I'm just going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to head and create. So once I hit the create button, this will actually now establish a blueprint, and you'll notice that the name has been appended with another stamp for date and time. What this allows now is any subsequent teams to utilize this these software versions for any subsequent tests. As an example, I'm going to go ahead and add a input here, which we're going to have identified as a white hat security scanner. And it's simple as selecting it, adding it to the blueprint, and this notion right here is the create connection, which allows a network connection to be established with another endpoint. You can do this for each one of these products, and here's an example of how then this particular input, which is a vulnerability scanner, once executed, will send traffic to the Palo Alto Networks firewall, and then whatever that configuration entails will be accomplished. So that's just one example of how this would be actually set up and architected. Once this is saved, you'll actually have sandbox associated with that, and I'm going to go ahead and reference that particular sandbox. And you'll note right away that this is active and it has IP addresses associated with each one of these virtual machines. And this little health check tells you that it's the resource is powered on, and then you can actually navigate into to refresh IP and conduct other activity on this particular product. At this point, I'm going to go back to another blueprint, and this one is entitled the HA Performance QA, a particular one. And here you'll note that we have quite a few products associated with the high availability and failover scenario. So we have a duplication of virtual machines just for that HA environment. And we've also included a load or a traffic generator with the XCF, both on the client side and on the server side. So basically a request and response mechanism. Once we go ahead and hit the reserve button for this particular blueprint, you'll notice the same options come up. So if I want to make sure that the correct versions are in place, I can. And then I can go ahead and select the reserve button, which then actually then provisions these components in the environment. Basically what you have is the deployment of virtual machines. If there are any physical machines, they will also be reserved, and then the connectivity is established between each one of the components. I've already gone ahead and conducted that particular step, and here under my sandboxes you'll see now that that particular environment is set up and active. You'll note right away that there are green health checks, gives you a visual indicator that the environment is fully functional. And what I'm going to do here is go to the Ixia product, and you'll see this particular command option, and what that allows me to do is to come over to the right hand side and actually start some of the traffic generation. I can start, stop, and get statistics and have a report outputted from the results of this particular exercise. So that's quite flexible in what you can do and how often you want to run those particular tests. At the top menu bar, you also have additional options. If I hit that command, I can actually create a snapshot of in this environment, so it can be utilized maybe in other QA environments where they're testing feature functionality and not necessarily load and performance. And we can also use a snapshot to restore it to its default state or tear it down if the resources are not being utilized. So very flexible in that approach. And there's another menu tab here where we have the output, and as you'll note here, that the setup, the security rules, and how this is actually provisioned is you can actually see the console and view it as things are being activated and updated. And in this case, you'll see the sandbox setup finished successfully. So I'll go ahead and close that. One of the key things to these particular products is that you can actually console in to these individual components, and here we have options of SSHing in. So if you do need to get on the command line and make a final change or ongoing changes, you can do that in a secure fashion. So navigating back to the lab management, we'll showcase the last one that we have here, which is the loan application itself. So far we've been touching upon the network IT components, but if you wanted to take some of those components and then include them in the application pieces, here we've got a front end L4, L7 application server along with web server and the associated backend pieces for the application logic and the databases. These can have the same method applied to them as far as versions of software, how they're snapshotted, how they're customized with updates by accessing the console, and then you can conduct your required tests to make sure that the certification requirements are in place. So that's a quick overview of Acme Bank and the various environments, the different categories that can be included, different inputs, and then how they can then be accomplished with the different software versions to meet the required certification. So once, as you've noted with the Acme Bank demonstration, it's really a matter of selecting the various products that you require for an update, making sure that you have the right software versions, creating the blueprints, having templates made available, snapshotting them so other departments can use them in their environments, whether it's in the security or the QA or different HA environments. And wrapping this up, you notice that the initial requirements for cybersecurity was to patch the TLS vulnerability, which we've concluded. The compliance then, we've got the right configuration updates for the products. And we did this in an efficient manner, where we could go through each environment expeditiously. So here we have now everything met, and it's ready to go into production. So some of the benefits that are associated with this, I'm not going to go through each one, but really from a segue from legacy and traditional approaches to what we've termed as lab as a service, what would take months and weeks can now be done in minutes and hours, and in some cases, not even hours. It can be really a self-service operation where it's a point-click, drag and drop, deploy, and you're ready to go. So let me hand it back to Shashi.
Thank you, Dos. Appreciate the demo as well as the walkthrough. And so with that, we talked a little bit about how you can use your labs, which are really gaining a lot of prominence today. They are at the heart of a lot of engineering innovation, as well as test innovation, and these can either be facilitators or barriers to the agile rollout of services as we discussed today. And one of the companies that is really at the forefront of revolutionizing lab services today to financial services industries, but also other verticals, is Worldwide Technology. They happen to be both a valuable customer as well as a partner for Quali. And the lab services at WWT is really, I would say, cutting edge technology with a lot of services and expertise around it. And to talk a bit about it, let me invite Christian back again. So Christian, if you would mind taking us into ATC, the Advanced Technology Center there.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start off, and thank you very much for the setup here. You made this conversation or this discussion a little bit easier for me, because at the heart of this, of the Advanced Technology Center, which is an environment that is growing. We're currently at about 275 racks in 3 different data centers in St. Louis, Missouri. We're actually looking to take the entire campus in St. Louis and actually build it out and make the entire campus, which is essentially between 8 and 9 buildings, into a innovation and lab environment in order to support our customers. But currently we're at about 275 racks of gear in 3 data centers. We've invested about $125 million plus in investment from an infrastructure standpoint. That's also hardware, software. We, on a daily basis, have about 100 or 150 on any given day active engagements going on, whether they be sandboxes, demos, proof of concepts, lab as a service engagements. I'll get into that a little bit more in more detail later on in the environment. We've also built out around 600 plus pre-built capabilities across multiple practices in cloud, storage, compute, collaboration, networking, software, and what we are able to do is spin these environments up, or these pre-built environments up, very quickly using the hybrid cloud infrastructure that we've built out to deliver those capabilities to our customers, whether they be financial services or beyond. And the other value that we bring to the table with the Advanced Technology Center is the amount of OEMs. This is a integration lab. This is a multi-vendor, architecturally independent multi-vendor environment that we provide to our customers to allow them to evaluate and make decisions quicker on technology, and also help them certify technology quicker in order to get those capabilities out to their production environment for either new solution or for day 2 remediation or what have you. The advantage of the environment is, from an access standpoint, we have 24/7 virtual access to the environment through what we call our ATC gateway. We rely heavily on automation between physical and virtual environments in order to deliver and to spin up, execute, and deliver results to our customers. And around an expertise perspective, we have that's really the value of the environment as well, is we have a large group of individuals that surround this lab environment. We do lab as a business, and we provide the expertise to help our customers develop test plans, execute testing, provide the appropriate documentation and certification documentation in order to make sure that they have the lowest risk of deploying a new component, technology, solution into their environment. And we've really worked enormously hard on the process, which is equated to providing the speed to get through testing and certification efforts to provide value to our customers. So if you look at the graphic below, our core infrastructure is very similar to what was described earlier. Cisco, NetApp, F5, Infoblox, Commvault. That's just a small amount of vendors that are at the core infrastructure. We have best-in-class testing with Ixia, Login BSI, Dell EMC, SolarWinds, and that's also a very small amount of capabilities as far as best-in-class testing. But the interesting part is the lab automation and orchestration is that we've actually developed a layer 1 switching environment so that we can stitch together all the components that are associated with those 275 racks together, and we use quality systems to actually bring different pieces and stitch different pieces together of an infrastructure very quickly in order to support our customers' proof of concept or testing needs. And what we've done is integrated that into ServiceNow, Salesforce, and Oracle through our software development organization, Asynchrony Labs, to tie this back to a self-service environment that is accessible by our customers 24/7. So these are essentially some of the 5 main areas that we see our customers desiring support for: product comparisons, migrations, architecture validation, performance, and functionality. These areas are primarily the high-level items that we see our customers desiring us to perform for them or with them in our labs. So again, the ATC ecosystem, this private cloud, if you will, which is our test labs, our research and development labs, our integration labs, and our training labs, are all tied together through the ATC private cloud that I showed you before. But we provide this capability to our customers, our professional services organization, to our own internal IT organization, to our partners, their sales teams and engineering, and also our sales and engineering organization. So what we've done is really worked hard on delivering a capability that is accessible not only physically, if you decide to travel to St. Louis, Missouri, but globally and virtually across the globe. And this is just a list of capabilities that we have within the lab. We've built out sandbox environments and integrated product and solution demonstrations within the HCC that are pre-built. That goes back to the pre-built environments we have. We do education within these technology centers through tech briefings, workshops, and training. Research and development gets into where customers want to evaluate and do pilot and integration testing or product benchmarking or even early field trials of technology. And then from a customized standpoint, we also have the ability to provide an environment for proof of concepts or POCs or lab as a service. And proof of concepts have a very defined beginning, middle, and end with you need to provide a high-level design, bill of materials, a test plan, and we'll figure out what the duration is and execute that for you, or hosting of a lab services, a lab engagement that takes the burden off of our financial services or enterprise customers and move that into the Advanced Technology Center, where we can surround that environment with our expertise and capabilities to make their testing requirements from a longer-term perspective more agile and efficient. So our engagement models for the Advanced Technology Center within WWT from a lab perspective is there are capabilities on demand. We have demos, sandbox, and training environments. All you need to do is contact WWT, schedule with your account team, and one of those 600 plus pre-built environments can be stood up and delivered to you either physically or virtually. The second level of engagement is through a proof of concept. We'll do a test plan and a specific success criteria that is based on a fixed cost and a timeline, or lab as a service, dedicated long-term customer labs that can either be done on a monthly basis, or we can actually provide that capability through a subscription model. So there are multiple ways of actually accessing and doing business with WWT from a lab services standpoint, and these are the three methods by which you actually can engage with WWT from an ATC perspective.
Christian, thanks a lot. And I would like to state that if you haven't had a chance to go visit WWT Center, anybody who's in St. Louis, just go check it out. It's something that really impresses you, and the advanced piece of the nomenclature in Advanced Technology Center really is advanced. You come out walking very impressed. And I've seen both customers as well as ourselves always walking back impressed with the facility that has been built up. But more importantly, what Christian and his team have done there is to standardize a lot of these environments. So they're in a position to respond to requests very quickly, and also allow for 24/7 access, which is something you need in this day and age of an always-on facility. With that, I wanted to just say, if you have follow-on questions or want to get in touch with Quali or WWT, these are certain things that you could do. Look us up on our websites and or follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. For those of you who are interested in participating in a survey, there is an opportunity for you to do that. Just click on the link below, and you could be eligible to win $100 in an Amazon gift certificate, and we do this every month. So we have winners every month. And with that, let's open it up for some questions right now. And again, for those who are attending this webinar, we'll have 3 people receive Amazon gift certificates of about $100 each. And I have a few questions here for both of you. And let me start off with you, Christian. Last in, first out. You talked about the ATC. What is the process to access the ATC remotely? Is that something you can quickly answer?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. So number one is getting in touch with the your WWT account team, or if you are not a WWT customer, you can access it through obviously our website. You can get to the ATC gateway, and what the ATC gateway provides is a list of all of the capabilities associated with those pre-built environments to start you on your journey to doing business with WWT from a lab perspective. As far as once you get there and once you've established a requirement for either a tech briefing or a demo or a sandbox, we do have an ATC gateway, and the ATC gateway provides you access virtually without any need for a client on your desktop or VPN or anything along those lines, but directly from your browser you can access an environment to provide you the ability to learn and to work within a sandbox that we can build very, very quickly. In some cases, we have the ability to build out environments on demand because of the cloud-based environment, and we can give you access to sandboxes within a matter of minutes. So it's a matter of just connecting with your account team, connecting with WWT, asking for a capability or looking through the menu of capabilities that we have through our portal, and then requesting service, and we can grant you that access through the ATC gateway.
Well, thank you, Christian. There's another question for you, mostly talking about the lab engagement. So you mentioned the different types of customers and the number of environments you had. Could you give an example of a lab engagement of one of your customers? You could name them or not, and their experience with WWT.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with a very, very large global bank who has been struggling with the legacy manual process and lengthy certification process for new technologies. And one of the problems they run into is technology end of life. So it takes them so long to certify, for example, a new switch to be put into their environment. It takes them 6 to 8 months to go through the certification process. And by the time they get through the certification process and are allowed to move to what they call a permit to operate phase, meaning that they can actually deploy that technology, a few months later, the product is going end of sale or end of support. So what we've done is we've developed a methodology to perform component testing or testing within a particular topology, using the ability to have quality stand up the environment very quickly and stitch the different components together, including the test tools, which are Ixia, the Cisco switches, and go through a particular test plan. They can have been able to compress their time to certification by up to 60%, meaning that an effort that would typically take 6 months is now taking 3 or even less than 3 months to perform by using WWT's component testing, and they do final certification testing, which gives them the ability to put out that technology into production quicker. Now, having said that, we also are engaged with them so that if there are bugs or issues that are identified during that certification effort, we're finding them in the testing phase versus finding them in the production phase, and that's providing them an enormous amount of value around risk mitigation when they deploy a new technology in the field.
Excellent. You know, cutting time down by over 50% is a huge deal nowadays, both in terms of cost as well as productivity. So I hope that becomes a successful outcome. So Das, in the interest of time, I'm going to just pick one of these questions for you. You talked about audits, you talked about compliance in the context of broader infrastructure, but then you took a specific slice of it with the network piece of it. The question here is really about compliance between IT and business teams, especially there is a lot of shadow IT. So the ask is, would these audits be different for cloud software with business teams front-ending versus IT and on-premise?
Great question. It's something I come across quite a bit. What you typically see is a new role, or a chief privacy officer, or a chief legal officer, that starts to step into the business requirements and with the CIO. And what they're asking is, are we subject to any compliance issues based upon regulations within a particular, in this case, financial services, or geographic, like some of the regulations like the EU-US Privacy Shield, or some of the data residency laws that are not allowing citizen data to leave their country. So as you start to look at those regulations and you start to interpret them within an application, a group may be introducing those audits with an outsourced firm to do the checks and balances. Meanwhile, they may not proliferate down to the IT equipment because it's inside the data center, and they're getting audited by another firm. So on the surface, it may look like that IT and the network and the infrastructure components are meeting certain regulations, but they may not extend all the way out to the business application and then to the geographic regulations. So in silos, they may be compliant, but as a end-to-end solution, which customers are expecting, they may not be. And those are some of the challenges that can be addressed when you put an end-to-end test bed in place using quality systems.
Thank you, Das. And so with that, I just want to give a plug to an upcoming webinar. This is more focused on cyber ranges. Again, very pertinent to those who are concerned about security, privacy, and being able to be proactive and prescriptive in terms of early detection in these environments. The topic is cyber ranges because you don't want to cry. And it's a joint webinar where we'd have speakers from Quali, Ixia, as well as the new stack participating. It's on the 6th of June. So mark your calendars and you can register here by clicking on that link or going to quali.com. And with that, I want to really thank Christian for taking time amidst his busy travel schedule. Christian lives in the airports and on the planes as far as I know him, and that's really good. He's a very customer-facing guy, most customer-facing guy that I have seen in recent times. So thank you, Christian, and thank you, Das, for pulling this together. I'm sure the material here is going to be useful to several people that are wanting to standardize on some of these solutions. And with that, we want to thank you for your time investment here, and have a good rest of the day.